everyone. Today I will talk about Yeats' second poem, Easter 1916. We've talked about last class about the Lake Isle. With these images, we've talked about, actually there's no poem, sorry about that. Anyway, the first poem of Yeats that we've covered last class is the Lake Isle of Innisfree, and today we will move on to his second poem, Easter 1916, in the middle period of Yeats' poetic career. And by going over this poem, I want you to compare Yeats' somehow the change, his poetic change, between his earlier phase of poetry and his middle phase of poetry. Earlier phase of poetry means that Lake Isle, then the middle period is the Easter 1916. So as you see here, the historical background of Easter 1916 is actually something that you can find information at the bottom of the page 2031. There's an explanatory note of the historical background of this poem, Easter 1916. The historical background of this poem is the Easter Rising occurred in 1916, as you see over there. During the Easter Rising of 1916, Irish nationalists revolted against the British government and proclaimed an Irish Republic. So basically, it's the rebellion against the British government for the Irish independence. So that's the Easter Rising. Nearly 1,600 Irish volunteers and 200 members of the citizen army seized buildings and a park in Dublin. So Dublin is the central place that occurred this Easter Rising. The first point is that it's the rebellion against the Great Britain. The second point is that it occurred in Dublin. Third one is that the rebellion began on Easter Monday, April 25th, 1916, and was crushed in 6 days. Over the next 2 weeks, 15 of the leaders were executed by fire and sword. So this is the consequence of the rebellion, that the Irish nationalist leaders have been executed by British government. That's the consequence. And Yeats knew the chief nationalist leaders personally. So this is the background. This is the photos of the executed leaders after the rebellion. Some of the names you may see, some of the names in this poem as well. As I've just talked, Yeats has known personally some of these leaders among these leaders. So for the poem, today I will be focusing on only the Easter 19, and then I will go over the next two poems, the Second Coming and Leda and Swan, for next class. Mainly for today, the key is that to capture the difference between the first two stanza and the later third and fourth, the last stanza. So for the first and second stanza, Yeats depicts this political event, the Easter Rising. He focuses on that political and historical event, but he gives us somehow subtle change through the third and last stanza, and you will see what it is. Okay, if we go over the first stanza, I have met them. Them represents the revolutionaries that Yeats has known. I have met them, I have met this revolutionary at close of the day, coming vivid faces. So why vivid faces? That's because Yeats has known them. From counter or desk among gray, 18th century houses. So what does this mean, 18th century houses? So it's the 18th century houses represent this Mountjoy Square, which was planned and developed in late 18th century in Dublin. So what this means is that this is the scenery of the Dublin. And I have passed with a nod of the head or polite meaningless words, or have lingered a while and said again polite meaningless words, and thought before I had done of a mocking tale or a jibe to please a companion around the fire at the club, being certain that they and I believed where motley is one. So what does this all mean? Yeats and these revolutionaries sometimes have to communicate with polite yet meaningless words. So that way there's a certain distance between Yeats himself and these political nationalists, these political leaders. Do you remember that Yeats was not identified himself with the political stance which views the literature should be employed for the political purpose? So do you remember that? So Yeats that way was not identified himself with these political figures. But still, there's a shared sense of Irishness between Yeats himself and these leaders, but in a motley sense. You can also grasp the definition of the motley at the bottom, number 2, in the explanatory notes. So the definition of the motley is, if you see the number 2, is the multicolored clothes of jester. So jester is the clown. See this one? So this is the motley. This shows what motley is, which means that the multicolored clothes of this clown. The point of motley in Yeats' use is that certain incongruity means that, so the point in Yeats' use of this word motley is that there's a certain incongruity, means that there's no harmony. So in Yeats' perspective, these political leaders and Yeats himself are not matched each other. So there's no harmony, even if there's a shared sense of Irishness. So that way, there's a certain limited sense of Irishness between these political figures and Yeats himself. So that way, their relation has a distance in motley sense with the incongruity. Then the last 2 lines, all changed utterly. The terrible beauty is born. So this is a type of, these 2 lines, a repeated sense of chorus that throughout the poem. We will get into these 2 last lines at the end of the poem. Then let's move on to the next stanza. That woman's days were spent in ignorant goodwill, her nights in argument until her voice grew shrill. What voice more sweet than hers, when young and beautiful she wrote to Harris? So here, in the second stanza, Yeats mainly isolates certain particular figures who have been involved with the rebellion. Then how does Eliot know these figures this much specifically? That's because Yeats, as I told you, Yeats has known them. So here, Yeats depicts the figures that he has known, that he sometimes has encountered on the street in Dublin. The first one is this woman, and the second one is this man had kept a skull. It's the 24th line. This man had kept a skull and rode our winged horse. Another man, this other, his helper and friend, was coming into his force. He might have won fame in the end, so sensitive his nature seemed, so daring and sweet his thought. This other man, I had dreamed a drunken, vainglorious lout. He had done most bitter wrong to some who are near my heart. Yet I number him in the song. He too has resigned his part in the casual comedy. He too has been changed in his turn, so transformed utterly. All of these figures transformed utterly. A terrible beauty is born. This chorus arises again. So, as I told you, for the first and second stanza, Yeats emphasizes on this political event, Easter Rising, as a specific part of the history. Then let's move on to the third stanza. Hearts with one purpose alone. Through summer and winter seem enchanted to a stone to trouble the living stream. This can be a little bit complicated, but if I unpack this complicatedness, these hearts symbolically represent the revolutionary hearts who have with one purpose alone means that the Irish independence. So hearts with one purpose alone means that the revolutionary hearts with the purpose of Irish nationalist, Irish independence. This goes to this revolutionary hearts with the purpose goes through summer and winter, means that all the time. These hearts enchanted to a stone means that these revolutionary hearts so much want the Irish independence, and that way they stick to this solid purpose for a long time in an intensive way. So that way their one-time heart can be a stone. And that stone to trouble the living stream. The horse that comes from the road, the rider, the birds that range from cloud to tumbling cloud, minute by minute they change. So what you see here from the line 44th to 48 is that horse, rider, and birds. These images, if you imagine these images in Yeats' depiction, they are moving as a living creature. And that way, because they are moving as a living creature, they keep changing. They keep changing minute by minute. A shadow, here's more. A shadow of cloud on the stream changes minute by minute. A horse hoof slides on the brim, and a horse plashes within it. The long-legged moor hens dive, and hence two more cocks call. Minute by minute, they leave the stones in the midst of all. So, unlike the heart, the revolutionary heart with the one solid purpose of the Irish independence, that revolutionary's heart could be unmovable stone because the revolutionaries stick to that purpose too much for a long time. But unlike that stone-like heart, all of other images, horse, rider, and birds, shadow of the cloud, all other images are the living one. And that way they keep changing minute by minute. So if I give you further note for this part. So for the third stanza, I may be able to try to explain one more time with this one. So you can imagine you can imagine the living stream as stream, the waterly stream. It's in 44th line. So you can imagine that this living stream as a broad sense of history. In this living stream, there's a referred image, other images of horse, rider, and bird, shadow of cloud, and among them there's hearts of the revolutionaries. So if these or other images are moving, keep changing minute by minute, unlike these movable images, this heart, the revolutionary's heart, because they stick to the solid purpose, only one purpose of the Irish independence, this heart may not be able to move. It's not easy to move through the living stream. So that way, this revolutionary heart this revolutionary heart could be unmovable stone. So this way, what Yeats evokes through this third stanza is that, first of all, he draws out the historical event of the Easter Rising. First, the specific historical event, Easter Rising, but he also evokes a broad sense of history which keeps changing, including all of these moving images. So that way, Yeats transforms the specific historical event as a part of the history. He transforms from this one to this broader sense of history. Doing so, Yeats more importantly draws out a changing energy by employing these moving images. So that's to see the comparison between this stone-like heart and these moving images, and how Yeats draws out a changeable energy through this through these constantly changing images of horse, right, and birds. So this is the key of the third stanza. Then let's move on to the last one. Too long a sacrifice, the sacrifice of the revolutionaries who have been executed, can make a stone of the heart. See, the stone of the heart? Heart could be the stone. If the sacrifice is too long. Or when may their sacrifice suffice? For this question, that is the heavens part. When may the sacrifice suffice? This is the question that heavens part. For our part, to murmur name upon name. As a mother names her child, and when sleep at last has come, on limbs that had run wild. What is it but nightfall? No night but death. So do you remember in second stanza, Yeats referred several, he actually does not directly refer to the names that he has known, but he anyway tries to murmur their name upon name in the second stanza. So Yeats views that's our part, to murmur the name upon name, rather than answering the question. Was it needless death after all? For England may keep faith for all that is done and said. So what this means is that Yeats here raises another question. Was all of their sacrifice needless? England may keep the faith. So for the 68 and 69 lines, that's talking about the England home rule. So in 1914, England has made a promise for the Irish independence, but England could not keep the promise because of the outbreak of the World War I in the same year, 1914. So what here Yeats may say is that if over time, because England has the promise already, then if at some point eventually the Irish independence happens, then would all of this sacrifice become needless? So Yeats may say like that way. We know their dream. So here Yeats again does not give the direct answer to the question, even if he raises the question. We know their dream. Our part is that we know their dream, and it is enough for us to know their dream and are dead. And what if excess of love the country, their love of the country, what if their excess of love of the country bewildered them till they died? Another question. But again, Yeats did not give the answer. Rather, Yeats says that I write it out in a verse. Rather, I choose to write a poem about MacDonald, McBride, and Connolly, and Peirce. These are the names of the leaders have been executed. Now and in time to be, wherever green is run, are changed and changed utterly a terrible beauty is born. So what Yeats has mainly done in the last stanza is that he invokes, for the first time, he invokes the political event of the Easter Rising. And then for that political event and then the revolutionaries, Yeats raises several questions, but he does not give the direct answers to the question. So that way, even though Yeats invokes the political historical event, he does not evaluate that event. For some political event, we judge that, we evaluate that in moral sense. That means that moral sense means that we can evaluate, we can judge often for a political event, we evaluate that whether it's good, whether it's evil, whether it's good, whether it's bad, or whether it's right, or whether it's wrong. So that way, we are judges certain political event in moral sense. But Yeats here does not politicize a highly political event of the Easter Rising. Rather, Yeats chooses to aestheticize that political event aestheticizes it. So here again, Yeats tries to evoke another transformation from a political event to a tragic event that could bring about an utter change. I'm gonna read aloud my notes. So rather than politicizing a specific historical event, the Easter Rising, Yeats chooses to transform that one to a tragic event that brings about utter change. This utter change is not the realm of a specific historical event, but broader sense of history itself. And through this history itself, or in this history itself, what Yeats draws out is a terrible beauty, a birth, that can bring about an utter change. The terrible beauty, a birth of a type of explosive energy, or the explosive energy that can bring about the utter change. So the key in the last stanza is that Yeats does not politicize the political event, but rather he aestheticizes the political event in order to draw out an explosive energy of the utter change. So this is how Eliot views the history rather than an historical event. So for today, do you see, especially for the third stanza, through the moving image, the images that keeps changing, do you see the difference between the very static image, the static, precise imagery in the Lake Isle? The image, the ways in which Yeats evokes the image in the Lake Isle in his earlier phase of poetic career is very different from this way of his capturing the moving energy, especially in the third stanza. And for today, I will stop here, and for the next class, I will move on to the last two poems, and I will wrap up William Butler Yeats. Thank you for today's class.